Can you imagine one battle that is changing the course of history? This happened right here where I am standing right now in Tel Afek. So Tel Afek was conquered by Joshua thousands of years ago when he came here with the Israelites, but Joshua was not the first one to conquer Tel Afek and not the last one. Because before Joshua came here, the Pharaohs already controlled this region, followed by the battles of Joshua and the Israelites. After that, Greeks, Romans, Crusaders, Ottomans, and even in 1948, during the War of Independence of Israel, there were battles right here where we are standing right now. And my question is, why is this place so strategic? And why, all throughout history, so many rulers wanted to have Tel Afek, wanted to control Tel Afek? We will try to answer this question today during the tour. Hi everyone, my name is Gal. I'm a tour guide here in Israel. In every video we go to visit other sites throughout Israel. And today we are visiting Tel Afek, a very unique and interesting site. We will talk about Joshua and the battles of the Israelites and other things, other findings that were found here and other things that happened in this location. Today we're traveling, it's February, February is almost over, it's almost March already, and we can see the blossom, we can see the plants that are growing here. What we can see here is mustard. If you recognize the mustard, there is a parable that appears in the New Testament, the parable of the mustard seeds. It appears actually 3 times in the New Testament. So I want to ask you, what does the New Testament says about mustard seeds? What is the parable of the mustard seeds? Write it down in the comments. Let's go to see Tel Afek. Why was Tel Afek so important, and why is it such a strategic place? In order to understand that, we have to understand what did people look for when they built cities in ancient times. So there are 4 things that you mainly look for. These are the things that people mainly looked for when they wanted to build their cities. So the first thing that you're looking for is a place that is a little higher than the rest of the region. You want to have the control. You want to be higher than the rest of the region, and this way you can see your enemy if it's coming. The second thing that you're looking for is normally a place where you can grow stuff. It has to be a land that is good for agriculture. The third thing that you're looking for is to be on the main trade road. The main trade road in this region was called Via Maris, which means near the path that is near the ocean. And we are on the Via Maris right now. Might have been this, actually. And the fourth thing that you're looking for, and that's actually the most important thing, is the water. Because you know what? All the rest of the things that we said, we can manage without them. If it's not high enough, that's okay. Just build a 2nd or a 3rd floor for your house. If it's too far from the main trade road, that's okay, you'll drive a little bit more. If the land is not so good for agriculture, that's a little tricky, but you can manage that as well. But there's one thing that you won't be able to manage without, and that's water. And what we have here is the water source of the whole region. We saw that Tel Afek has a lot of advantages, and it's very important for a lot of rulers because it's sitting on the main trade road, and it's also sitting on the top of a high hill. It has a water source. So a lot of the rulers wanted to control Tel Afek and wanted to have Tel Afek for themselves. And that includes the Pharaoh Ramses II that has actually a military presence here in Tel Afek. How do we know that? I'll get back to that in a second. But having a military presence in a place means it's not just something that it's in the outskirts of your kingdom. It's in the heart of your kingdom, and it's important for you if you put soldiers in the fort. So we are sitting right now inside the Canaanite fort, which is quite amazing. And what we can see here is that Israel has decided in every archaeological site, that's something that they started doing after the digging of Masada, that below this black line is everything that was found, and on top of it is reconstructions, which means that when Joshua will come here with the Israelites, he saw these rocks. These were the rocks that Joshua saw when he came here in order to conquer the fort from the Canaanites, because this was here. This is the original fort that existed during the times of the Canaanites before Joshua came here. Where we are standing right now is the place where Joshua came. That's what he saw. How do we know that there was a military Egyptian presence here? Because of the artifacts that were found here. Thankfully, we have the pictures of what was all the artifacts that were found here, at least some of them. Everything was taken to the Israel Museum, like every other archaeological digging around the country. But we have spearheads, and I want you to remember these spearheads because we'll get back to those spearheads at the end of the tour. But this is the place that stood in the way of Joshua's path to Jerusalem and to conquer the land. And the following are the local kings whom Joshua and the Israelites defeated on the west side of the Jordan. They were the king of Jericho, the king of Ai, near Bethel, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Eglon, the king of Gezer, the king of Geder, the king of Hormah, the king of Arad, the king of Libnah, the king of Adulam, the king of Makkedah, the king of Bethel, the king of Hepher, and the king of Afek. The Bible tells us that Joshua defeated the king of Afek. Afek was, as we mentioned many times in this video, in a very important location. We can see just behind me the water source, the Yarkon River, which until now is the very main water source in Israel. Back then, it was the most important water source in the region. All the people that lived in the region were relying on this water source. So, in order to protect his people, Joshua had to conquer the Afek. Who was Joshua? Joshua was actually one of the leaders that the Bible tells us about. So, in order to understand who was Joshua, we have to go back to the leader before Joshua, Moses. Moses was leading the people all the way from Egypt for 40 years, and until they enter the Holy Land, the Promised Land. But he was not the one to lead them into the Promised Land. Moses knew before everyone were entering the Promised Land, he already knew that he's not going to be the one who is taking the Israelites into the Promised Land. And when you think about it, it might even make sense, because you belong to the generation that has been in the desert for 40 years. But this is a new era. This is now the era of the Promised Land. And maybe we need another leader that will lead the Israelites instead of Moses. And Joshua was the perfect man for this job, because Joshua himself, he was the supporter and the assistant, if you want, of Moses himself. And he was one of those 12 men that were sent to explore the Holy Land, the Promised Land, before they enter the Promised Land. But all the other 10 said that the people who live here seem way too big, and it looks like we're not going to beat them, we're not going to defeat them. But Joshua was one of the two that said, no, listen, you guys, this is the Promised Land, and if God said he's going to be with us, he's going to be with us. So we should enter the Promised Land, and we should fulfill the promise that was given to the Israelites by God. And he was the perfect leader to take them inside the Promised Land because of that. So Joshua was the person that was sent in order to make sure that the promise that God has made many years before that to the descendants of Abraham will be fulfilled. And this is like a reflection to Jesus. Moses was the one to lead the people out of Egypt, and he will save the Israelites from slavery. Joshua later on will be the one who will lead them inside the promised land. So Joshua and Moses together, they will save the people from the slavery and will bring them into the promised land. Jesus Christ, many years later, will save the people from the capital sin and will give them salvation. It's not a coincidence that they share a name. Joshua and Jesus, in Hebrew they have exactly the same name. So Yehoshua or Joshua, before he was named Hoshea, this is what the Bible tells us, and then Moses will be the one who will change his name, and that's a very common thing that happens in the Bible, into Yehoshua, which means the one who will bring the salvation. Later on, the Greeks came here and expanded the city, but what we see nowadays is mostly from the times of King Herod and the Romans. So we've been to many sites that were built by King Herod. So you already know King Herod loved building huge cities, and in every city that he builds, he always makes sure that the city is a Roman city. For example, he would have a sewage system that is designed in the most recent design. As we can see right here, we can recognize those Roman arches, but that's not the most beautiful thing that he builds right here in Tel Afek. What King Herod builds here in Tel Afek is this theater. And a theater is something that we find in all the Roman cities that were built by King Herod, but also in normal Roman cities around the kingdom. King Herod loved Tel Afek, and he decided to call it after his father, Antipatris, and that's what we see right here. We can see the Roman city that was built by King Herod, and luckily for us that he was here, because every place that was visited by King Herod, as we know, we have enormous remains from the times of King Herod. The Crusaders came here and they built a fort here because Crusaders built forts. But the remains that we see nowadays, the huge fort that exists nowadays, was not built by the Romans, but it was built by the Ottomans. And more specifically, it was built in the 16th century during the days of the magnificent Sultan Suleiman. And if you've been to Jerusalem, I'm sure you remember the huge walls that surround the city. Those walls were built by the same ruler, the same Sultan Suleiman. So we saw Crusaders here, we saw how the Ottomans were here, and they left us this huge, enormous fort. In 1948, we already discussed the importance of this area because it has the water supply of Tel Aviv and the whole region, and that shows us how in every different period Tel Afek was very important, and everyone wanted to have Tel Afek for themselves. We have arrived to the water pipes, and that brings me back to the times of the Brits. So I'm going back 100 years ago. In 1917, the Brits have arrived to this region, and without a fight, they started the British mandate that lasted until 1948, until Israel was established. So the Brits brought one of the biggest renovations of back then, and that's the water pipes. So we didn't have pipes, not just in Israel, but all over. It was something, it was the modern technology, you might say. It's like, the smartphones that we carry nowadays, something that is a huge renovation, but it just spread all over and became something very essential. Same thing with the water pipes. What did people do before they had water pipes? So before we had water pipes, what people used to do is to go to the cistern and to fetch water from there. It was usually the job of the women, and it was like a social event for them. They used to come to the cistern and to sit all together next to it, and they would talk, they would share the news, who got married, who got divorced, who had children, who had a twin, and that was the place where they gathered, and that was also a social event. And when the Brits brought for the first time the pipes to the region, a lot of people said, who am I going to talk with now? I can't talk to the water pipes, they're not listening. So it took a time until people actually agreed to go to use the pipes instead of the water system. This location has a very important, it's very important, and it has the strategic of this area is very high, because as we said, this is the water source of the region, and not just of this region. The water from here, from the river that is behind me, from the Yarkon River, they flow to Tel Aviv, which means that this is the water supply of the whole region of Tel Aviv as well, but not just Tel Aviv, but the whole metropolitan. All of the region this is the water supply. And that's why it was important in 1948 when the War of Independence started. So Israel has declared its independence in 1948, and one day after 5 armies attacked Israel, and this was a spot that was very important for them to have and to control, because if you have the water, if you control the water source of the region, you control the region. That's something that not only people understood here in 1948, but also, I remind you, King David had the same method. And if you want to learn more about King David and how he captured Jerusalem and how he captured the water system and the water source of the city, I invite you to check and to look for my other video in City of David. So we know that was something that in war, it was a tactic of war. If I control the water, the water source of the region, I don't need to control the region. The region will not be able to survive without its water, and therefore I control the region. We're almost done with the short hike that we did inside Tel Afek, where I'm sitting right now. Here you can actually swim if you come here during the summer. Today it's a little chilly, it's too cold, but if you come here during the summer, you can actually swim in these pools. You can bring your kids. It's a fun way to spend a hot day here in Israel, and we have plenty of those. So come here during the summer. I cannot promise it's not going to be crowded, but you can definitely swim in these pools. So Tel Afek is more than just a battlefield. Yes, this place has seen many battles, starting from the Pharaoh that had his military presence here that we've already mentioned, Ramses II. Later on with Joshua, Israelites, even the Philistines later on, Greeks, Romans, Crusaders, Ottomans, and even in 1948. But this place is much more than just a battlefield. I remind you the little spearhead that was found, the Egyptian spearhead from the Canaanite period, from thousands of years ago, that was found inside the fort. A replica of this spearhead was given to Sadat by Begin in 1979 when the peace treaty between Egypt to Israel was signed. That reminded me of a sentence from the book of Isaiah 2. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. So the potential of a place that has seen so many battles to become a place of peace, this is Tel Afek. I remind you that if you like my videos and if you like my content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and thank you for watching and for being with me on this tour in Tel Afek. Okay, that's it, we're done? We're done.